Welcome to the Greed Geek Podcast with your host, Jason Fern.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Greed Geek Podcast. We are still in the early days of the Greed Geek, and our mission and our format is continuing to evolve. I've decided to broaden the scope of our topics to include anything ranging from trading and investing to business and entrepreneurship to economics and industry news. All of this is going to be centered around an interview with some really engaging guests. I hope you look forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. This week, we're going to talk about kids, financial literacy, and overcoming the odds. I'm very excited to introduce my guest today, Derrick Stephens. Derrick has an MBA and a master's in social work from UCF. He's the CEO of Phoenix Healthcare Consultants. He's a co-founder of First Step Care Assisted Living Facilities, among other things. Research faculty at Florida State University College of Medicine. And man, I'm getting out of breath, but he's also the founder of Underdog Dreams, which is a nonprofit to benefit foster care children. And Derrick, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Jason. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So you've been a successful entrepreneur. You've been a leader. You've accomplished a lot in your life, but you had a really kind of tough go at it just starting up. You had some challenging circumstances. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in the foster care system as a result of my mother being schizophrenic or diagnosed with schizophrenia and battling substance use disorder and alcoholism during my childhood. My father equally suffered from substance use disorder, and he actually committed suicide when I was 9 or 10 after he actually murdered his girlfriend in a hotel in Atlanta. So if you only can imagine kind of having that start, coming up in Atlanta, Georgia, bouncing back and forth in foster care. So yeah, I could go on and on about the barriers, but despite that upbringing, I think I'm a better person for it.
So I mean, coming through all that, how do you come from that situation to even thinking about college, let alone going to college and getting all these degrees that you have?
One of the things, and this is a statistic, this is part of what I teach, brain science and stress. What the science says is kids need at least one trusting, supportive adult. That is one of the main factors to push people ahead. And for me, that happened to come in the form of who I call my grandmother today, Naomi Davis, my Nana. But truly, she was my foster parent. And she just brainwashed me, man. I tell people, believe it or not, I was in special ed coming up. I rode the short bus, everything. But she continued to say, you are meant for greatness. She would literally say that. You're meant for greatness. And it just stuck in my head. And that pushed me. That drive to kind of make her proud is where it started. And then it transitioned over to just kind of internally, I wanted to do more with my life.
So I know you're an athlete in high school because we actually competed on wrestling and track and field teams together. But I don't know this about you. Were you a great student?
I was actually. It's funny that you say that because I remember being in Sebring High School and taking some college courses and people being really confused on seeing me in the class because I graduated, I think 3.6. I graduated with National Honor Society, but I also got suspended and put in ISS equally as much. So I did pretty well in high school, considering the circumstances.
So was it your foster care beginnings that inspired you to go into social work?
Yeah, I kind of, I think sometimes your calling finds you, right? So I went through a couple renditions of what I wanted to do. Initially, in high school, I wanted to be a geneticist. I really got into like regeneration, making limbs and things come back. And then I want to be a psychiatrist. But anyway, when I went to UCF, I was majoring in biology to start off. But unfortunately, I did not have the study habits to be successful in that platform. So I switched majors a couple times and then found myself just like really sitting down. Okay. And I'm being totally honest here, right? kind of what degree can I get that my credits that are all jumbled from psychiatry to I thought I wanted to do 3D animation, and somebody told me about social work. But I think it was the best thing that happened for me.
And so, today you're a leader. You have you do a lot of things, but one of the things you're really passionate about is this Underdog Dreams. So tell me about that organization.
Yeah, Underdog Dreams, we're dedicated to improving the lives of foster youth, giving them an opportunity to dream of the possibilities. And what we focus on is education, psychosocial education, mental and physical wellness, and leveraging innovative technology to move forward child welfare. A lot of people don't know that foster care or child welfare stems from the early mid 80s, Charles Brace, and it was something known as orphan trains. So in the Northeast, we would put kids on trains, load them up, send them to the Midwest, and kind of hope that they ended up with a good family. So we want to make sure that we are catching child welfare up, for lack of a better term. It's pretty archaic, so that kids can actually have a chance. And what we want to do is do the same thing that was done for me. Be a foundation for kids, right? So yesterday I was talking to two of my kids, and when I say my kids, these are foster youth that I've met along the way. These two particular individuals I've known since they were 14 years old. They're 19 now. And for them just to know, hey, one is I'm in the hospital, but to know they have someone to call who is going to look out for them, it goes a long way in motivating people to push forward. So, yeah, we just want to make sure that kids have a fair chance at determining the trajectory of their own life.
Yeah, I guess that, you were talking about earlier that role model is such a huge thing for them. And you also gave me an interesting stat that only, 3% of kids end up in college? Is that what you said?
Yeah, graduate college, or only about 50% graduate high school.
Wow.
And, another stat that kind of, I think, puts it all in order is 80% of death row inmates have experienced foster care.
Wow.
So our stats and our outcomes are not, they're not good at all.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think about, my upbringing was kind of lower middle class. But my parents were, we didn't have to worry about food on the table. I just think, how much harder is it when you grow up in that kind of situation where you don't have a lot of people that can guide you?
It makes it tough, right? I would say you have people that are guiding you, but all those people may not be guiding you down the right path. As a kid, we have adults around us. I would say, I had limited role models that actually were kind of showing me a path that was different from the guidance that that also comes along with that type of situation. I remember being in middle school. I tell a story. I sold drugs for literally 20 minutes. Right? I'm so serious, right? Somebody gave me some crack actually, and it was guidance, right? It was, hey, do you want to get money? This is how you get money. You don't have any way to get money. And what two things kind of got me out of that. One is that I found out I was too analytical, right? I was trying to kind of overthink it. People want to make deals, and then at 20 minutes I was overthinking it. But the thing that got me was my grandmother in the back of my head, right? I was saying if she knew I was doing this, she would be so disappointed. And that was enough to make me go back and say, hey, this isn't my thing. So role models and people, that you respect and that you want to make proud can go a long way in shaping the behaviors that we choose.
Absolutely. And I think expectations as well. Like, I mean, one thing that for me, I know it was never a question. I was going to college. Like, and a lot of kids in underprivileged situations, that's not a given, and they maybe even not a viable path. And people just don't, teachers, parents, nobody really looks at them and expects that of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny you say that, Jason, right? I always had it in my head that college was my thing because, I have 6 older sisters. My oldest sister is a dentist. And so I had the privilege of kind of watching her and knowing that there was something better out there. But at the same time, as I was going through school, and I mean, this even happened in Sebring and many other different schools, not just Sebring. I mean, I literally had teachers tell me, you're going to be dead or in jail by the time you're 18, just with a level of certainty that is scary to think about at this point. So when we talk about guidance and role models too, sometimes those people who are supposed to be charged with encouraging us to reach our greatest potential are the very people that are telling you otherwise. And when you're young, that can really shape your moves. That can really, take an effect on your psyche or what you think you're capable of. So for me, I was a bit of a rebel. And I think that pushed me through, right? If somebody told me that, it gave me enough energy to say, all right, you think I can't do this? I'll show you different.
Yeah. So, beyond just the socially disadvantaged or whatever situations that might be disadvantaged, so many of the children are graduating high school without any kind of background on this. We don't teach it in schools, right? There's no investing, there's no business, there's no personal finance. So kids are graduating without the ability to budget, without understanding what debt is, going to piles of student debt. The expectation is that they learn it at home, but the reality is they probably don't. And to me, that's a mixture of two things. One is our society has taught us that it's impolite to talk about money. A lot of people believe that it's like a taboo topic. And two, like a lot of parents just don't have the skills themselves.
Yeah.
So what do we do about it?
I think it's going to take changes in our belief system. So when you talk about the kind of societal norm of not talking about money, for me, I started off the conversation with my kids kind of the way I heard it coming up. I don't have any money. I'm broke. I would say that. And what I found is that they don't need to hear that, right? We're not broke. I tell them we're not broke, but we're not rich, but we're not struggling. And there are reasons why we're not. And we start to have those conversations so that they can realize that it is not where you want to be, or I don't want to use the word normal, but it's not something you strive for. You want to be financially stable, and to just start having those conversations and not be fearful to tell your kids, yes, we have money, but we have money for these reasons because we make these decisions. I think that's a big one from the cultural standpoint. And then you're absolutely right as far as parenting. Me and my mom still have this conversation, and I think she would even agree that she's taken on new money behaviors through our conversations. And so it was kind of a reverse, it was full circle, me teaching my mom how to be financially literate or stable. So yeah, you don't know, right? You come up, your parents not talking to you about it. You hit UCF, and back in 2000, I remember walking down the corridor and there were tables lined up all the way across. And I think I walked away with a $1,500 credit card, a cell phone, a Tuffy card, and I had no clue what
they'll give you that way to get into debt. Yeah. And then when you ask for help getting out, they're not going to help you get out.
No. And the funny thing, Jason, your mindset, right? I had heard, okay, credit cards are for emergency. I'd heard that. But I remember, and I don't know what version of Jordans came out at that time, but I remember they came out in my head. It was an emergency because if I didn't buy 2 pair, which ended up costing me $300 today, they were going to be off the shelf. So, even what we perceive as an emergency, which constitutes spending, some money on a credit card is I look back and laugh. I really think back and laugh.
Yeah. It's funny that, you talk about teaching your parents financial literacy. I told you before, my dad and I had a conversation that I remember, 22 years later when I was graduating high school. He said, son, your mom and I have given you a lot of great examples, and I hope that you follow us in most of them, but not financially. My dad is somebody who they tried to get him to do direct deposit. He was a firefighter, and they wanted to direct deposit his paycheck into the bank account, and he refused because he didn't trust it. He's like, no, I want a paper check. I want to go down and cash it and get cash. I literally had to teach him recently how to use a credit card at a restaurant because they just don't do it. So they didn't invest. They didn't do any of these things. So yeah, sometimes it goes in reverse, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is important to talk to our kids about these things. I'm curious, like, to what extent are you open with your kids about finances? Like, do you tell them like, hey, we make this much money? And
Oh man, my kids would probably roll their eyes if they heard you ask that question. My kids call me Mr. Krabs, right? I I talk about money. I wouldn't say quite a bit. It doesn't dominate the conversation, but I talk about money and business and entrepreneurship quite a bit because I won't pretend that I've gotten through the whole book, but I think it was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, I've heard it.
The portions that I was able to read talked about just changing the mindset of our kids from being kind of employees to business owners. So, I'm constantly talking to them about their business, right? And it depends, what I share with them depends on their age. So
Mhm.
one thing that I should mention is I have 4 kids of my own, and my nephew lives with me. So I have a 19-year-old that's in college, sophomore in college. I have my 14-year-old daughter, my 14-year-old nephew. I have a 7-year-old son, and I have a 15-month-old daughter. So depending on who I'm talking to, so for instance, my oldest son just called me. He's majoring in business, and he has this knack for being a barber, right? And that's not, he went to college, and I was all on. He's going to be a computer engineer. He really likes business. I never thought he would say, "Hey, I want to be a barber." But what made me feel good about the conversation, this is last week, he knew everything. He knew the market. He knew the industry. He knew the cap, how much is annually coming in. He knew about the pandemic that took people out. He knew about the expenses. And it was so refreshing for me. And it was so exciting because prior to that, he really hadn't found a passion. And to hear him talk about, hey, and not only talk about it, I don't want to put him on blast. He started to practice, and he's making a little money, right? He's, we cut our friends' hair and things of that nature. But to hear the way he had that conversation, I can tell he had been listening, right? He'd been listening over the years about business acumen and things you need to know and how to establish that, right? So that's him. When we come down to my daughter and my nephew that's 14, we have conversations about, one time they asked me, we do this thing on Friday where it's like the kids don't watch TV or do any video games during the week, right? To each his own. It's just our thing. So Friday is a big deal. Friday is like a movie night. We get candy and all kind of things. So my nephew and my daughter, they decided to order a particular candy, right? And then they changed their mind and they wanted ice cream. And so they said, well, we want ice cream now. And I said, no, you already decided on the candy. And they're like, well, the ice cream is only like $5 more. Why won't you just get the ice cream? And I said, because it's unnecessary money being spent, right? And so I have conversations with them that the reason why we're able to be financially stable is because we are making even down to the smallest decision on how to spend money because it adds up, right? And so same thing for my 7-year-old. So depending on how old they are, they get different variations of the money talk. But no, I don't tell them how much we make. I've started to disclose to my oldest some projects and contracts I've had. I'll tell him kind of how much that is, but I always remind him, just because a contract may be worth this much doesn't mean I'm actually bringing that much in, right? So yeah, different conversations at different levels.
Now, you were telling me the other day about you make your kids write business proposals.
Yeah. Yeah. So my nephew, he actually likes to make money, right? So he'll come to you and say, hey, is there any way I can make money? So he came to me and I said, yeah, sure. We got three cars. I said, you can wash the cars. Cool. How much? And I said, well, it doesn't work that way. You need to submit a proposal. And so him and my daughter and my son, my youngest 7-year-old, oh, we want to make money too. And so I said, cool. Okay. You guys talk together and you can submit a proposal. Well, my daughter says, well, I don't want to do it with them. I said, well, that's fine. Now you're a competitor. Now you separately can submit proposals, and then we'll see who wins. And so
put it out for bids. Go ahead.
you got to put it out. And so, they were asking me, I gave them little tidbits, but they had to research. They had to look at the market. They had to negotiate with one another. And we talked about the pros and cons of doing business on your own versus bringing in additional help and resources. They submitted a proposal. I must say, my nephew submitted a proposal along with my son. My daughter did not. And so you automatically took yourself out of the running. But luckily, my nephew is nice enough that they gave her an opportunity to come in under their business. And I'll tell you a funny story. So, he had put a price out there, and then he said, hey, so, my daughter, we're all going to work together. and he wanted to change the price to go up. And I told him, no. My price doesn't change. What you do with the money you make changes. And so you brought another person in, you have to account for, that expense. And so I use every opportunity I can to get them hands-on. And I think that goes to what we do with Underdog Dreams. When I talk about education, we're really big on experiential learning. I think too much we teach kids things, in the setting of sitting, but we don't put them in position to actually practically play this out. So I make sure that they have money in their pocket, right? They are going to invest in stocks, right? They're researching now what they want to invest in. I want them to have tangible experiences with dealing with and handling money.
So yeah, I was telling you earlier, my daughter and I, this is her when she was real little. We used to watch Shark Tank together. I'm a Shark Tank fanatic, and I've watched not only the American episodes but all the Australian Shark Tank episodes, right? But so we used to watch Shark Tank together, and she's just kind of an imaginative player. So I would have her imagine that she's starting a business, and she would pitch these things to me, and we'd have a whole Shark Tank episode ourselves, right? So I think you have to kind of reach your kids at the level of where they're at and what's fun for them and their personality, right?
Absolutely. When we talk about stocks, one of the things two lessons that were told to me, right? And I won't pretend to be, deep into stocks, but Warren Buffett, and I cannot remember his documentary. He's a role model of mine, but I watched his documentary on HBO. And, one of the things he said is, only invest in things you understand. And for me, that holds true, right? Especially being a novice, I guess I want to make sure I understand things. The other thing, my father-in-law told me is, don't start investing until you have the money to lose. And so I kind of took those lessons, learned those lessons. But I say that to say I take those lessons and I give them to my kids. So my nephew is really into Funko Pops. They're kind of like these bobbleheads that they have different lines. So it might be Marvel or it might be Ninja Turtles or something like that. And I think they cost between $10 and $15 each figurine. And so, he probably has like 100 of these things in his room. And I told him, how much have you spent on this? And, we kind of calculated. And so I told him, are they public? And we looked it up, and there you go, Funko Pop, right? And I cannot remember the parent company, but they are public. And we looked up, per share is like $13, $14. And so what I told him is, these Funko Pops, yes, they may be worth something a long time from now, but it's more likely that the stock will actually bring you value. So what I told him is, for every one Funko Pop you purchase, let's purchase one stock, and you just go back and forth. And now you're 12 years old. And by the time you're 22, 10 years from now, you have a pretty decent stake in this company.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think I'm going to do the same thing with my daughter. She's also 12 now. And she's into video gaming and Pokemon and things like that. So I think that'd be a great opportunity to say, okay, we're going to establish you this account. You get to pick what stocks you are, maybe make her do a little bit of research, PE ratio or something like that, right? Just to get a little something in there, and then we can follow it. And I think that might actually, that's going to be interesting. She'll be able to follow. Is she making money? Is she losing money? Does she want to buy? Does she want to sell?
Yeah, and I think, the advantage of me getting my MBA, I was in sales for about a decade. And I realized that there were things going over my head when I was in, these big rooms with these big wigs, and they knew business and different things of that nature. And so it was one of the toughest undertakings of my life to go back and get an MBA. But it opened my eyes so much to, what business really is, how to really go gather information. So I say that to say, I'm not, I won't, again, I'm good at what I do. My kids, we were even going back to find financial statements, right? So they would look at a company and say, hey, this is a publicly traded company. You can go find their financial history. And we would go find it. And then we would have conversations about, okay, they're bringing in this much revenue, but what's the cash flow, right? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, just because someone says they're making $100 million a year does not mean they're necessarily a successful company. And even those little things like blew their mind, because it's like me before I knew. It's like you hear that and you think, oh, they're a major company. But you start looking, it's like, oh, there's no cash flow. There's no money.
Yeah. I think the key is what you're getting at is the hands-on thing. I drive my daughter to school a couple days a week, and I try to talk to her about some of these things. We talk about stocks, talking about investing, because half the time I'm trying to trade on the way I'm at traffic lights and whatever. But but I was trying to explain to her in terms of like a lemonade stand the other day and like profit and losses, and you pay this much for the lemons. It may be sinking in, but she doesn't let me know it's sinking in. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But I think you got to find ways to bring it at their level and something they're interested in, and make it hands-on. That's when it's going to stick.
I think too, Jason, we hands-on, and I think, we were talking about, we have all these subjects that we learn in school. And this is my opinion. I think school is very much outdated in the way that we present it to kids, the things that we're talking about. Schools, in my opinion, are still set up to produce factory workers, people that just kind of come in and follow directions and do certain things.
Yeah.
I think we're living in a new era. Globalization is here. It is here. And for our kids to be behind the 8 ball on financial literacy, I don't care how smart you are, valedictorian, you can get the best job in the world. If you don't understand how to handle money, how to make good decisions and investments, it can come back to bite you. And I just don't believe we're putting our kids in a position, in a systematic way, right?
Yeah.
Position to just be exposed to these things.
Well, one of the things that we don't teach our kids that, rich people teach their kids is the difference between assets and liabilities. And that goes to the book that you're reading about, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? You can spend your life trading time for money, but unless you're one of those really lucky ones, you're not going to get very far. What you have to do is create assets that are going to generate money for you, right? And also, we were talking about earlier, thing that we don't teach our kids is the power of compound interest. And this is something that we need to teach our kids. If you invest $1 in your early 20s, it's probably worth more than investing $5 in your late 30s, right? And so we did this math earlier, Derrick and I, before the show, and we figured out if you put $6,000 in your kid's account when they're 5 years old, and you can manage just to put $50 a month in their savings account, and then when they graduate out of the house, you got them in that habit, and they continue to do $50 a month, not $50. Everybody can do that, right? At 8% compound interest, which is the average of the S&P 500 over historically, that'll be at 1.35 million. If they do nothing else, 1.35 million by the time they're at retirement age. Nothing else, right? And hopefully they're doing other things, IRAs and whatnot. But it's just a powerful thing.
Jason, when you talk about we have conversations. I know you're passionate around social justice and things like that. When we talk about the culture of money and things, my kids will, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way because I wear Jordans, right? But like I tell my kids, my feet are never gonna grow again. I've had my Jordans for 5 years plus. I will continue to have them, right? So for me, it's my thing that I spend money on, not a ton, but some, right? But it really shifted. Learning things like that really shifted my thought process on how I spend money on my kids, or where I spend money with my kids, right? For my kids, I'm not spending money on Jordans because their feet are going to grow. It's kids thing. They're not going to have these shoes. Instead, I choose to look at that stat you just put up, right? If I took just $6,000, and anyone who has kids knows we spend much more than that on frivolous things if you just think about it, right? But to be able to put away $6,000 for my kids early on, and the financial freedom that it allows them to have, which brings me back to generational wealth. I don't think it's a secret that people of color are behind the 8 ball for different reasons, right? It's like when I first learned about redlining. When you look at real estate and the inability during certain times to really gather and keep real estate, and so this generational wealth concept, on a larger scale, we're a bit behind by every statistic. And so for me, it's also important not to just have personal wealth, but to start thinking about how can I set up a situation where my kids can be financially free, but start to build some momentum in our lineage, at least, for this generational wealth. So for my son, for instance, and I'm gonna give kudos to him too, because he really pushed hard in college. I mean, in high school, to put himself in a position, to get scholarships and different things of that nature. But one of the goals of mine was to not have my kids leave college with debt.
Yeah.
He's a sophomore, and we're still there. And if all things stay the same, we should be good. And so what I told him, to be able to leave college with a savings account, with some stocks in hand, and no debt, that is a game changer for your life in general. If you can that's your springboard. Zero debt, a good education, a good financial foundation. You write your own ticket from there. Minus the things that just happen in life that can throw things off a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard the illustration about like life is a race, and we're all running the same race, but we don't have the same starting line, right? So,
Yeah.
like, you can start behind, by having maybe a social economic disadvantage, but you can also start behind by graduating with a mountain of debt that you won't pay off until you're 40 years old, right? So, avoiding that is obviously massive. All right, well. I think that about covers it from my perspective. I really have enjoyed having you on today. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Hey, before we go, I want to make sure that everybody knows that you click that subscribe button. We do want to have you back on future episodes. Derrick, maybe I'll have you back sometime.
Definitely.
Hey, everybody, until next time, stay hungry, stay passionate, and stay greedy.
Follow Greed Geek on Twitter and Facebook at Greed Geek, and follow on Twitch at Greed Geek TV.